take the stand.
Thank you very much, Martin. I am so excited to be here today to talk about this subject. Nutrition is something that's near and dear to my heart. I have spent many, many years as a registered dietitian in practice. I'm also a board member of the Wholesome Village that is doing wonderful work promoting food and nutrition in the community. So let's get started. We're going to talk about building those strong foundations for healthy family nutrition. So, our objectives today, we're going to answer the key question. What does eating healthy mean? That's a hard one because healthy to one person might not mean the same thing to someone else. But we want to see what is universally healthy. What are some of the best foods we need to include in our diet? What are some of the worst foods that we should probably uh, diminish in our diet? Is there a perfect diet? And I think the most important question, do I have to give up my favorite foods or my family traditions that revolve around food? And of course, that answer is no, no one has to give up their favorite foods or their cultural foods, including the dietitian who's speaking. So remember that nutrition is the greatest area of health fraud and confusion. We're going to make it easy today. So, how am I going to make it easy? First, remember, nutrition is a science, it's not a fad. People will say to me often, well, last week someone told me that this was good to eat, and now I'm hearing on the news that it's not good. Science changes, and sometimes nutrition facts change accordingly. So we need to really be mindful of that. There are many, many things that really influence our food choices. And I have to say, we all maybe need to kind of look at how we make our food selection. But what are some of the things that affect us? Well, first of all, I spoke about culture and religion. That does affect our food selection. The amount of time you have to actually make healthy meals. What other things? Maybe food security. How much money do you have to put meals together? Do you have some health concerns? Are there some environmental problems in your community that would affect your food selection? So there's many things that influence our food choices. But what should not influence our food choices is thinking about fad diets. And I always add this to any presentation that I make. And why? Because a fad diet is the greatest and latest and most popular thing that's going on. And what happens is that many people get kind of sucked into these kind of eating patterns, and they're not helpful and they're not healthy. So you've heard these terms: keto, paleo, vegan. Vegan isn't really a fad diet if it is used for the right reasons. I know a lot of people who came to my office that would say, I'm a vegan. And when I'd ask, well, why are you a vegan? Is it for philosophical reasons? They would say to me, no, I think it'll help me to lose weight. So then that would be a fad diet because being a vegan is not necessarily going to help you to lose weight. Then we always hear about clean eating. My joke is, okay, is that as opposed to dirty eating? So what does that mean? And then you've heard of juicing and low sugar and detox diets. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's the basics. When we think about nutrition, what should we know? We're busy people. We don't want to read on and on about nutrition. We want to be able to plan our meals, eat healthy, influence our families in a reasonable about a time, right? So let's talk about the basics. The basics. You have heard the term macronutrients. Now the key is like people are saying my macros. So what are macronutrients? Those are the major part of your diet: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. Micronutrients are the things that we need in small amounts, but we do need them, and that's vitamins and minerals. So let's talk about protein first. What does it do? How much do we need? And how much is too much? So we're going to answer those questions. So what does protein do? So you know what? I really have them in a little bit of a misorder because the most important thing that protein does, it maintains muscle mass and bone health. So when we have muscle, you know what? The muscle in our body burns calories. The little bit of fat that sits under my arm, I won't admit to, that doesn't burn calories. So we need to make sure we consume sufficient protein so we maintain our muscle mass and our bone health. But as I said before, since muscle does burn calories, it helps manage our weight. And in times, it helps us with weight loss when we're decreasing our overall calorie intake. Also, it reduces the risk of diabetes and heart disease. Why? Because it decreases if we're consuming a high amount of protein, hopefully we're reducing our intake of carbohydrate, and we'll talk about that. So the building blocks of protein are amino acids. Amino acids are all these blocks, they come together and they make a complete protein. There's two sets of amino acids. One is called essential. They have to be there to make a protein. And then one is non-essential. Those add to the different types of protein. But listen to this. This is where probably our ancestors were really smart because for a complete protein, for a protein to be complete, all those amino acids have to be present. So if you are not eating meat, not eating fish, you're a vegan or a vegetarian, what do you need to do? You need to complement your protein. So let's say you were going to have beans. Beans are an incomplete protein. But when you hook it up with rice, you're making a complete protein. So that's what I'm saying, that sometimes our ancestors were really smart. They got things right. They put beans and rice, or they put pasta and beans. So they were making a complete protein. So someone asked, what about tofu? Tofu is soy-based. Soy-based protein is a good protein, and it is complete. Another complete protein is fish or eggs or meat. Those are all complete proteins. So most of the time, the incomplete proteins are the ones from plant sources, and that's where you need to complement, except for tofu. So, how much do we need? Well, this has been the big controversy because we're hearing that we need much more than that we thought previously. But I'm going to say the minimum amount for average male 19 and older is about 56 grams. The average woman is about 19, over 19 years is about 46 grams. Remember, pregnant women, lactating women, that's going to be much higher. So, how much is too much? So, really, there's no upper limit as advised by the dietary reference intakes at this point. But we do know if you're getting excess amount of protein, you're going to get excess calories. A lot of times protein doesn't kind of sit by itself. It does sit with fat and it does sit with carbohydrate. So if you're eating excess amounts, you could be getting excess amounts of calories. But the other thing is, if you are consuming a great amount of protein, then you are getting much more nitrogen. Nitrogen in protein is what the kidneys excrete because that's harmful to our body. So in theory, very, very high protein intakes can cause a little stress to your kidneys. So where does protein come from besides what I said, milk, eggs, um, meat, fish? So it does come from dairy products. So the protein in dairy products is called whey protein and casein. Different than lactose. If people are lactose intolerant, remember lactose is the carbohydrate portion of the protein. That's why if you have any little ones or yourself, you have a dairy allergy, remember you're allergic to the protein portion of the dairy food. And the protein portion is whey protein and casein. I am sure you've seen a lot of protein supplements out there, and you say, is it a good protein supplement? Well, you can have soy protein supplements, or most of the time, the protein supplements will have either whey or casein. So, what does the food label tell us about protein? So, when you're looking at a food label, if it says 10 grams or more of protein, that's a high protein source. If it's a good source, it could be 5 to, 9.9. And then when it says extra protein or fortified, that means it should be 5 grams more than the traditional product. So if you're getting a cereal and it says enriched with protein, well, it should be enriched by 5 grams or more than the usual amount. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is one of my favorite foods. I don't know if it's one of your favorite foods. I always say it's, due to my family heritage, I love pasta. Can't help that. So there are many areas where carbohydrate is found. But think about it. Most of the time, it's found in grain. So that means bread and rice and pasta and even legumes have carbohydrate. It's also in fruits and vegetables. And what I said before about dairy, remember, protein doesn't sit by itself. So the carbohydrate in dairy is lactose. So what do carbohydrates do? Because, carbohydrates are getting a really bad rap, right? People say, oh, I'm on a carb-free diet. Well, that's really bad to be on a carb-free diet. Why? Because you need the energy from the breakdown of carbohydrate for your body and your brain. When you eat carbohydrate, it gets converted to glycogen and it gets stored in your muscle. So that's why you need that carbohydrate for physical activity and daily movement. That's why elite athletes do eat carbohydrate because that really gives them that energy. Also, it gives us fuel for brain function and concentration. And then the fiber found in high fiber carbohydrates, whole grain carbohydrates, are really good for healthy digestion. It helps us eliminate and think of fiber as nature's room. It helps sweep out all the bad things in our GI tract. That's why very low fiber diets have been linked to an increased risk of colon cancer. So we really need to remember fiber is very important for us and must be in our diet. So let's look at some of the high fiber carbohydrates. So we got fruit, all different kinds of fruit. And you know what's great about fruit? You should vary the colors. The same thing with vegetables, because each fruit and vegetable that has different colors, guess what? The vitamins are giving them the different colors, and then you're getting a good variety. And remember, those vitamins are part of your micronutrient intake. So we have all different kinds of fruit. Vegetables, we have sweet potatoes, corn, peas. Don't forget those as vegetables. They're good and high in fiber. And then we have all other vegetables, whatever vegetables you like. It could be your family favorite, or it could be some new vegetables. Broccoli, cabbage, many, many vegetables are out there for you to choose. And we really need to concentrate on those vegetables because it gives us fiber. It gives us good complex carbohydrate, not excessive carbohydrate, and it gives us vitamins and minerals that nothing else does. And then again, we talked about the whole grains. So it's far better if we can to eat brown rice or wheat pasta. That's kind of hard for me, I have to admit. I love pasta, so that wheat pasta is hard. Maybe you love rice and that brown rice is harder. So but we need to do it maybe every other time so we're getting more fiber. and then any kind of whole grain or whole wheat bread. Beans and lentils give you really great fiber. And then good sources of carbohydrate, if you can tolerate, is milk and yogurt. Again, good source of protein, good source of carbohydrate, an excellent source of vitamin D. So I happen to hail from Florida. Martin and I were speaking, and he's in Maryland. So you would think I get more sun in Florida, so I don't have to worry about vitamin D. But I put plenty of sunscreen on so I don't get sunburn. So I am not getting as much vitamin D. So, depending if you wear sunscreen, depending on your skin tone, is how much vitamin D you can get from the sun. So, we need to include those vitamin D rich foods too. So now, which are the carbohydrates that we should not be eating? Because those are the bad carbohydrates. When you hear bad carbohydrates, what you should think is sugar. Sugar does nothing for us. I always chuckle. People come to my office and they'll say, well, I don't eat sugar, but I eat honey. And because I'm goofy, I say, just because the bees made it doesn't make it any better. It is still sugar. Your body still breaks it down and will do what with excess sugar? Excess sugar will increase your calories, will make you gain weight. Excess sugar can bring up your blood sugar if you have a problem with your blood sugar. If you have a family history of diabetes, pre-diabetes, definitely something to limit. So your sugary drinks, your candy desserts, those are the things that we have to limit. And we enjoy them, no doubt. And maybe we want to enjoy special occasions. I have to talk about these highly processed snacks because we're seeing more and more of our children really having too many snacks. And think about it. When you go to a store and you see kids and the parents are trying to, keep them occupied, what are they doing? They're eating snacks all the time. So we're just feeding children a little bit too many snacks. They're getting a lot of carbohydrate. They're getting a lot of salt with them. And maybe we should swap some of those snacks, which are very expensive, with some fruit. That would be a much better choice. So, what we want to do, these are easy things for all of us to do. Use whole grains instead of refined carbohydrates at least 3 times a day if you can. Fill half your plate with vegetables. Any vegetable you like, any way you want to make it, except probably deep fried. That's not always the best, but try to snack on other things besides those processed snack foods. And don't forget the fiber is so important. So now let's go over to fat. Why do we need fat? Because some people will say, well, I don't want to eat fat. It's not good for me. Well, in fact, you do have to have some fat in your diet. Fat is essential, and it's essential to our cells. Also, there are certain vitamins that are absorbed in the presence of fat. So those vitamins are A, D, E, and K. They are needed for absorption. The fat is needed, excuse me, fat is needed to absorb those vitamins. So, and then we need essential fatty acids, which help with brain development in infants and children. And do you know we're actually looking at possibly combating dementia in adults with essential fatty acids? Some of those essential fatty acids you might have heard about is things like omega-3 fatty acids, that good fat that you might find in or some kind of fatty fish. Or if you like flaxseed meal or some kinds of nuts, they will also have some omega-3 fatty acids. Salmon is the best for this. If you're not used to eating salmon, if that's not usually part of your family tradition, maybe you can experiment and see. It could be something you could incorporate. But fat is essential nutrient for your body, and to stay healthy, we need to have some. Our problem is we have too much of it because we like lots of fried food. So if we like French fries when we go out once in a while, we're getting a lot more fat than we need. The best oils to use, because this is a big one now, is the polyunsaturated oils. So, as a matter of fact, corn oil is a good polyunsaturated fat, also a monounsaturated fat. That's why olive oil is touted so much as a really good fat. You might not be used to cooking with it. You might need to experiment with it. But olive oil does not have, you cannot heat it really at a high point because it'll break down. So if you're using oils that you need to heat it a longer time, corn oil is probably the best to use. There is some concern about seed oils. We're not sure if those are valid concerns, but again, to be conservative, then you could possibly just use corn oil. So what does fat do? It gives you long-lasting energy. It makes you feel full too. When you have something in your meal that gives you a little fat, you feel full and satisfied. It supports brain health, which we talked about already, and then it helps absorb those vitamins. So, examples of fat. So, these are heart healthy fats, avocados, nuts and seeds. So, if you do like almonds, walnuts, chia seeds, those are all good. Olive oil, canola oil, corn oil, excellent. And if you do like fatty fish. Fish is one of those things, if you grew up in an area that you're kind of landlocked, you were never exposed to fish, it's probably hard for you to include it into your diet. I find that a lot with individuals that just were never exposed to fish. So it's something maybe to try a little bit at a time because it is really good for your heart if you could. You want to limit fried foods if you can. And then, of course, saturated fats like, stick butter and high fat processed meats. So, things like, bacon and those kind of processed meats, which are really hard sometimes to resist. I was invited to a bridal shower this weekend for a dietitian that used to work for me. And of course, everybody walks past the table and looks in my plate because I'm a dietitian, right? So I have to put like a little sign. I cannot resist bacon. So I had a piece of bacon, and I think the place was all talking about the dietitian having bacon. But again, if you're eating this once in a while, not a big thing. And we already talked about snacks. Now, what are trans fats? Trans fats are fats that are chemically altered. So they're usually like a liquid fat that is altered and then made into a solid fat. Trans fats are very bad for our heart. The thing is, when you're looking at a food label, you want to look that it doesn't have any trans fats because the American Heart Association doesn't want us to have more than 1 gram of trans fat a day. But if a food has a half a gram of trans fat in it, if it has like a half a gram of trans fat, it doesn't have to be on the label. But think about it. If you buy two food items that both have a half a gram of trans fat and it doesn't have to be on the label, you already got your 1 gram of trans fat, correct? So, what you need to do is look at the label and try to make sure that nothing says hydrogenated fat. That's where they take a fat from a liquid to a solid source. So good type of fats, like we said, monounsaturated fat, olive oil, avocado, nuts, plant oils. That's the corn oil I talked about. That's a plant oil. And those are all those omega 3, 6, and 9, which is good for our brain, and we want to limit saturated fat. So when we eat meat, it's always a good idea to trim the fat off the meat. Even with the new dietary guidelines, we hear about, different things about fat intake and how we could ease up on fat intake. We could ease up on worrying about fat intake. That might be true, but the American Heart Association is still saying, hey, if you can trim the fat off the meat, if you can drain it after you cook it to skim that fat, it's better. And we already talked about uh, the hydrogenated fat, trans fat. So, what's really good for us? Back to basics: vegetables, fruit, lean protein, animal or plant, whole grains, and then a small amount of fat. So, what's really good for us? Well, these are the things that are really great: kale, beets, mushrooms, chickpeas, legumes, water, nut butters, chia seeds, flax seeds, probiotics. So if these are the superfoods, so if you're eating kale and beets, good for you. They really help with your blood pressure. Excellent for you and excellent for your iron level. So before we can improve our nutritional health, I think we need to go shopping to access good, healthy foods. So what do we do when we talk about food shopping? I mean, this seems like, oh, okay, Lucille, you're going to really, I will tell you, if you go to the supermarket hungry, everything looks good. Everything will end up in that basket, even when you don't want it to. If you don't make a list, things end up in your basket. If we're all on a budget, if you really want to make sure you're getting the best buys wherever you go, I would say cherry pick. You know, I kind of laugh because this is something that my mom used to do. I grew up in New York, and she was a divorced mom of two, so money was tight. So she would go from store to store with a little book. That was before computers and phones, and she would mark down who had the cheapest on certain foods. And I remember once she said a store manager came over to her and thought that she was like a secret shopper before the time of secret shopping. It's a really good way to get the best from all the stores you're going to save money because you want to get the most nutritious foods. And I always tell people, don't fall victim to, oh, fast foods are going to be cheaper than me cooking a meal. You can cook a meal cheaper than a fast food restaurant, and it could be far more healthy. Prepare a list, plan your meals ahead of time. I always like to say, especially if you have picky, picky family members, plan your meals. Saturday, Sunday, have a menu meeting. Sit down and say, what's your favorite meal? We're going to make that this week. Let me look at what the stores, what the flyers are, what's on sale, and I'm going to plan the menu accordingly. So comparison shop all the time. Remember, in a supermarket, what are they doing? They're putting products in a way to grab you, and it's usually the most expensive things that are on the ends. Now you're seeing all those snack foods on the ends, right? So when you go to the supermarket, those end displays are all those fast foods. Buy seasonal. I will always say to people, if you're trying to buy something like peaches in March, it's not peach season in America in March. So you're going to be paying a premium because you're getting peaches from somewhere else. Try to shop seasonal. Try to shop local. If you have a farmer's market around, that's always great. And when you have that shopping list, it really reduces that impulse buying. And don't forget to read labels. So, this is what a typical label looks like. I think the most important takeaway message for anyone looking at labels is first to remember, look at what the serving size is. That's what they're talking about on the label. They're not talking necessarily about the whole box. They're talking about one serving size of this food has 260 calories. And then there's two servings in the whole container. So let's say this was a bag of potato chips and you took that bag of potato chips and you ate the whole bag. Guess what? You would have consumed 520 calories because there were two servings in that bag. And anything they tell you in terms of the calories, fat, cholesterol, sodium, it all has to do with one serving size. And they define what that serving size is right on the top. Important for you to know. What's important for you to see? Looking at the calories, looking at if they have trans fat. This has trans fat. We don't want that. Looking at the sodium, especially if you have a family history of high blood pressure. We don't want really high sodium foods. And again, look at fiber if you can, and minimizing foods with sugar. So label terms. Low fat means it's less than 3 grams of fat. Fat free, less than a half a gram. Low sodium, 140 milligrams of sodium. Reduced fat, a 25% reduction. And light means at least a 50% reduction in fat. Just FYI, we're supposed to. Okay, so there's a question. Who gets to decide what is the serving size? Does the government regulate it at all? No. The government doesn't regulate what goes on a food label. Let's just go back to that food label. This is just all information about this food. This comes from the food manufacturer. It has to be accurate. Now, you could be one of those doubting people. I told you already I grew up in New York, so maybe I'm a little bit of a doubting person. But if a food company lies or misrepresents a food product, then guess what? They could get big fines. So this is from the food company. The food has been analyzed to say how much fat it is, how much carbohydrate, how much protein. It has to be put on this label in exactly this certain way. And they will tell you what the portion size is. And that is the food company decides how they want to present their portion size. But the government doesn't tell us what the portion size is. So let's talk about key nutrients in fruits and vegetables. Oh, so first of all, vitamin A, these are the micronutrients we're talking about. Vitamin A is really important for our vision, and it is found in deep green leafy vegetables, yellow, orange, red. See, again, all those wonderful colors. Vitamin C, known for our immune system, mostly in fruits and vegetables, especially citrus fruits. So you should buy oranges from Florida because I live in Florida, right? So those are really great for that vitamin C. What do you get from leafy vegetables? Folate, which is important for our blood, especially people who have maybe a risk for anemia. Potassium is found in many fruits and many vegetables, also very important for us, and then dietary fiber. So what's a recommended portion? And this is just recommended to say, is this how much we should be eating? This is about a 3-ounce portion, which is usually recommended for adults. So I think this is really important. Martin and I were getting to know each other, and we were talking about how our culture has probably molded some of the foods we love to eat. And, that's really very important. I know it's important to me, it's important to my family. And what Martin and I were talking about, which I think is really wonderful, and I'm sure you will all agree, that food is what brings us all together. Food, I don't know what group, because, people will say, well, in my culture, meals are really important. And I kind of chuckle and I say, okay, what culture isn't it important? What culture isn't it important to have celebrations around food? We enjoy food. We enjoy spending time with family, friends, etc., social events around food. And that's fine. So I always say, enjoy the food you love. Do we have to give them up? No. Can we alter them a little bit if they're not so healthy? Maybe. Can we diminish the amount of them if they're not so healthy? Yeah, I think we can think about that. But let's remember, food is what brings us all together. How we cook it is what we differ. So, and then I was saying to Martin that sometimes we see traditional recipes that were brought over from other places, and the American adaptation of it is so different. So, you could have a friend of Asian Indian descent who will say, this is not traditional. This is not how we make it back home. Because why does it get adapted here in America? Sometimes the food items are not available, or maybe some of the really good items are available a little bit more, so we make adjustments. So let's just always remember that's what brings us together. That's what gets me excited. So can we make some small changes? Sure. We could bake things instead of frying them all the time. We could always add vegetables, and we could always adjust our portion sizes. We could make little twists for healthier meals. We could make pasta and lean protein. We could make rice and beans and vegetables. And again, we could bake as opposed to frying. So I always like to say no one diet is perfect, not one. The best plan is sustainability, what you can sustain. And remember, your culture is your strength. So this is a typical plate that I think, looks really wonderful. You could add vegetables and grains and fruit and some kind of protein. For the gal who asked about the tofu, you got your tofu on that plate too. So what should your plate look like? Any of the vegetables and fruit you like, vary the color. Now, you might say to me, Lucille, I live in a place I don't get access to fresh vegetables. Guess what? You could use frozen vegetables. They're very good. Now, frozen vegetables are harvested and frozen right on site. They're blanched immediately to preserve the vitamins and minerals. So don't feel badly if you can't get fresh vegetables, or maybe frozen vegetables are a lot more affordable. So then I would say get those. The canned vegetables, they're a little high in sodium. So you might want to rinse them. You might want to get the ones that are low sodium. Remember your grains. Those are the high fiber. Now, let's try to make a little less of our plate, those grains. So again, if I go back to my pasta analogy, and whatever your analogy is, I need to not put my three-quarters of the plate pasta, right? So maybe we could shrink it a little bit so that we have a little less carbohydrate, and then make sure we have that protein. And if you want to add that dairy at some meals for that extra calcium and vitamin D, it's a good thing to do. Kind of remember the supermarket. There's just so much there, right? Always hit the healthiest section of the supermarket. And you probably all know that's the outer perimeter. That's the vegetable aisle. That's the meat aisle. Those are the healthiest. When you go in the aisles, that's when you're getting a lot more of those processed foods. I think this is a duplicate. We had that slide already. So, again, for the trans fat, I want you to look for things that say no trans fat. On this Dorito bag, it's a little bit hard for you to see, but it'll say trans fat, and it will say hydrogenated fat. Again, look for that word. That's the word that you want to avoid. Anything that has to do with hydrogenation of a vegetable oil. So, the American Heart Association recommends, if we like margarine, fine. Use liquid because the liquid is not hydrogenated. So, this one is only partially hydrogenated, but if you could get one that's not, you couldn't. In terms of margarine, you would have to use olive oil or corn oil instead. And sometimes that doesn't spread on something, right? So understanding sodium, because I think sodium is really important. That's kind of like the silent ingredient that's really affecting us, especially if we have high blood pressure. So a high sodium diet, well, let me flip that. Sodium intake is recommended at about 2,500 milligrams a day. The average American consumes about 7,000 milligrams of sodium a day. So I hope that a lot of people are saying, oh my goodness. So think about it. Where are we getting sodium? We're getting it from processed foods. We're getting it from cured meats if we eat cured meats. And then the natural sodium that's found in food. So these are the terms for low sodium. Anything that's under, 5 milligrams of sodium is sodium free. And anything that's lower than 140 milligrams is, a low sodium. So what I want you to do is remember, you want to look at what says no added salt or unsalted. So this says no salt added. So you think, oh, great, this is a low sodium item. Is it? No, I don't think so. It has 155 milligrams per cup. According to our terms, that's not low. It's not horrific, but it's not low. And that's where you see the sodium. But this is something, think about this. You know what this is? I don't know if you could see Marchon. This is, ramen noodles. So 1,220 milligrams of sodium for one container, which equals one serving. So think about that. You're getting almost your whole day's worth of sodium in this food. And that's because it's so much is added to it. And again, look at something like this. It says reduce sodium intake. And it is less. It's 580 milligrams per cup, but that's still not a super low sodium food. So if you are somebody who's on a low sodium diet, these are things that you have to look at. And you can make the comparison. I just grabbed a couple of different brands. So if you're in your store, look for brands if you're going to use things like these, because this is where you're getting a lot of sodium. This is the other area we're getting a lot of sodium. I can't go, you know what? When I go to the supermarket, I envision crime scene tape on the snack aisle. Now you're going to really be laughing at me, right? Because I love potato chips. So I can't go in that aisle. And if you think about it, that's where you're getting lots of salt. You're getting a lot of fat because most of it's fried. So you want to try to minimize your intake of these. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. And I'm going to chuckle because I know a lot of people say, well, I don't come from the Mediterranean. That's okay. Why do we like the Mediterranean diet? Because we find that the people who consume this diet live longer. So we want to live longer. So we want to take some of the things they do and say, how can we do that and incorporate it into our culture? The same thing with a DASH diet. So the DASH diet is a dietary approach to stop hypertension or to stop high blood pressure. So you see here, it includes vegetables. It includes lean meat. That's what's really important. So what I want to say is these are the two diets that we know are healthy diets. Why are they healthy? Because they do promote fruit, vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, fish. That's a hard one, I know, for some people. Give it a go. Try it. Because we do see that the DASH diet affects blood pressure and helps people with blood pressure control. The Mediterranean diet is great for people who have high cholesterol, cardiac disease, they need weight loss. So if we could take some of those elements and put it into our diet and kind of infuse it into our cultural foods, that would be really good. So I like to say healthy eating can include the foods you love. Absolutely. The key is how those foods are prepared and balanced, not changing your culture. So again, emphasize those vegetables and fruit, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, lean protein, and limit what? The salt, sugar, fried foods. The biggest problem in our country, as you know, is diabetes and the disease of obesity. And it really drives healthcare costs up. It affects our health, it affects our productivity. And there's really good ways to help control diabetes and to help with weight loss, which, unfortunately, being overweight is an inflammatory process. So it does put you more at risk for these other inflammatory diseases. So, a couple of other healthy tips. Drink water. Water is really important. You need to drink lots, lots, lots of it. So, walk around with a water bottle. You can get one of those neat water bottles where you can fill it up. You don't have to buy plastic water bottles. I've gone beyond that. I don't use plastic water bottles. I try to use a filter on my refrigerator, so I don't use plastic water bottles. And I bought a nice water bottle from Walmart that has like, some kind of steel inside. So if you could do that, you could fill it up. You could see how many times a day. And you really need to be drinking at least 38 plus ounces of water if you can. Watch your portion sizes. That's the whole key. When we talk about the perfect diet, anything could be okay if it is an appropriate portion size and include those good, healthy foods. So I like to say healthy eating isn't about changing who you are. It's about strengthening what you already do well. So I have a couple of, because I have 6 minutes. So just fun facts and myths. Is high fructose corn syrup worse than sugar? No, it's the same. Carbohydrates make you fat? Anything we eat too much does. Calories eaten at night are more fattening than those eaten early in the day. False. Fasting helps you detox. False. Your liver helps you detox. Dairy products are fattening and unhealthy. That's not true. It's how much you're consuming in a day. And drinking apple cider vinegar burns fat. Not true. Gives you really bad heartburn, though. So, the magic formula for weight loss and good health is eating healthy and enjoying your food and just practicing good portion control. So what's a registered dietitian? I always like to end with this. A registered dietitian like myself, we're the nutrition experts. We go to school uh, and are trained in the area of physiology, biology, chemistry, food science, and food. So we're the ones who really know what is good to eat and what can affect us, especially if we have health problems. So I think I left it for 5 minutes for questions. I'm going to escape this, so maybe then I could stop sharing. Stop share. Here we go.
Thank you so much, Lucille. That was highly informative. So we really appreciate your time and taking the effort to put this presentation together. If anyone in the audience has any questions for Lucille, please feel free to type it into the chat, or if you'd like to come off mute and talk, if you just send me a notification through the chat, I can enable the talk feature for you to be able to ask. So feel free to type any questions that you might have into the chat. While we're waiting for them, Lucille, I guess I had a question for you as well, out of my own curiosity. Do you have any recommendations for any kind of apps, or because I know there's different kinds of nutrition related apps that kind of help you manage, your diet or just keep track of what you're eating. Are there any that you've had any experience with that you recommend
Yeah,
for
there's
people to use?
so many now, Martin, and it really depends on how savvy people are. There are apps that you actually scan the food item and then it brings it up. The last one that I had used, oh, it goes right out of my mind now. Fitness Pal.
Ah, yes. I was just thinking about
So
that
I
one too.
think that's like the easiest one, Martin,
Hmm.
because they do have a feature where you can scan it, but that costs money. So I think that the cheapest one is my Fitness Pal, and I like it. But there are a lot out there, and many of them now have a monthly fee. And I don't
Yeah,
particularly like that monthly fee. So what I just tell people, you could just Google the food and it'll bring it up. That's just as easy, but it just will not add, it will not add up your intake over the day.
absolutely. Yep. Excellent question, or answer. We have a question here from Brennan. He typed in the Q&A box. He says, "Thanks so much for your time and expertise. What are your thoughts on the new dynamic pricing attempts by grocery stores, and how can families eat healthy without being taken advantage of?"
So I think I need a little clarification what the dynamic pricing means. I think prices are going up all over, and that's why I say you really should cherry pick. You should go to different stores if you're able to see what's on sale so you could, that you could get the best bargain. But yes, prices are going up, and what we're seeing, and I think in the previous question, we're seeing sometimes the packages are shrinking. They're not altering the portion size. Again, the portion size on the label, they're talking about a certain amount. But maybe they're selling things that used to have three portions in them or three servings, and now it has two servings. And you have to do a little math sometimes, and you have to be really um, probably alert to what is the pricing. I'll tell you what I do. I will go to this supermarket name brand. And that's what we're seeing a lot.
Hmm.
And retail research has shown that people are moving from the popular brand to the supermarket name brand. So in my area, I don't know if you have in your area, Martin, but I have Super Walmart. I go to Super Walmart and I will buy their brand if it's something that I think that I could save some money on. Um, and that helps. Does that hopefully answer your question? And then, like I said, you look at the different supermarkets to see who's going to have certain things on sale. I think it's really important. If you just go to one supermarket, guess what? Some of them are cheap in one area, but expensive in another area.
Absolutely.
Does
I
that
agree with
help a
that.
little bit? I hope that helps a little bit.
I think it does. I think it does. I think it's about kind of how to families maintain, that affordability aspect, especially now when we're seeing rising food costs, and with the dynamic pricing is typically how I understand it is when they have electronic labels on the shelves and then they update them electronically, sometimes live while people are shopping. So it's like,
Oh,
yeah, so it's this like dynamic way of offering. Um,
that's very sneaky. I've not
it
heard of that.
is. It
Excuse
is.
me for that I'm ignorant about that. I had not heard about that. And that is really sneaky. They should do something
Mhm.
about that. It would seem to me that overnight you could change, like
Yeah.
if you say you change prices on Friday night and okay,
Yeah.
but you don't change it while people are in the store. I mean, I've not heard that before. I'll do a little digging and thank you for,
Yeah, I don't think it's
educating me on that.
gone mainstream yet, but I do
Oh,
think that it's at least some stores have been piloting it. So, but
really?
I do think that the backlash has been pretty negative. So I don't know if that's still going to continue but it's
Yeah.
definitely something
It should be
people,
there. It should be
yeah,
negative. It's nasty. I'm sorry.
yeah, it's not good.
No. Um, and then the other thing I'm going to say, and again, because I'm a dietitian, just forgive me. Don't buy so much packaged food. It's expensive. Ounce for ounce, it's more expensive than making it yourself.
Hmm.
It's just time. And I know none of us have a lot of time, but there's little ways that you could do things. You could do things, do a little prep cooking sometimes on the weekends. You could chop some vegetables, put it in a bowl so you have it for the week. So there's ways to do that. And you save a lot of money.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we are now at 102. I know everyone, you all have pretty busy days, so we're gonna let you all get back to your day. We want to thank you again, Lucille. We hope to have you back at some point in the future for a part two.
Love it.
We
Be
will
happy
be
to.
wonderful, wonderful. I will be uploading this recording to our YouTube channel and we'll distribute the link so those that weren't able to join can still learn all the great information we got today. So, with that being said, Lucille, thank you again. And everyone who joined, thank you and hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Take
Thank you.
care.
It was my pleasure. Bye bye now.